Welcome to today's Photo Minute. My name is Brian Osborne of the Photo Classroom. It's great to be back with you today with another segment of a teaching time, and many of our segments have been concerning kind of technical matters, camera skills and that kind of thing, which is always helpful. But for a couple of reasons, I decided to maybe talk about the aesthetic side of photography a little bit today, and specifically composition and how the composition or framing in our compositional understanding and how that might even apply to general wildlife images. You say, well, how did you kind of get on that topic? Well, two things. One is that we have a Composition 1 virtual class coming up this Thursday. I hope some of you will sign up and join us for that. And so we talk about all these different things that make a picture a great image, different compositional rules and techniques that we can use. And one of those that we talk about a little bit is framing. But then I also got thinking about that a lot of us, especially myself, are photographing during this period of time. We're photographing a lot of wildlife, but wildlife that's usually around our home. And so wouldn't it be neat to think about how we can use composition as we're kind of shooting some of those images and use framing specifically in general wildlife images. And that's why I wanted to broadcast from the back porch today, partially because it's a beautiful day. But what you see behind me is in very much what you're going to see in some of the sample pictures that I'm going to show that were both challenges and kind of worked out fairly well in terms of some compositions that I was able to create. You say, well, what do you mean by challenges? Well, what I mean by challenge is that, at least for me, I can't control where the animal is most of the time. And then I often notice that when the animal lands on a branch, let's say, that there's usually some other branches that I think are kind of in the way, and sometimes they are in the way, sometimes they obscure even seeing the animal, but that they aren't always in the right position. They aren't always exactly where I'd like them to be, the things surrounding the actual wildlife that I'm photographing. But the more I've been looking at some of my images and thinking about this whole idea of composition, the more I've started to realize that actually there's a lot of framing elements that are taking place, and that I'm able to actually incorporate, even though I didn't necessarily control the situation, that I'm able to incorporate them in a way that makes for some neat images in the final result. So what I want to do is just share a few pictures with you. You're going to see them up on the screen, and I'm just going to describe for you where I think kind of the framing as part of the composition of the animals takes place. All the shots that I'm going to show you are images that have been actually photographed in the last 2 to 3 months, and so they're current images. Some of them I just did in the last couple days. The first one I wanted to show you was this picture of this bluebird here, and it's neat to see the gaze of the bluebird kind of down this diagonal, and I love diagonal lines. Many of you know that if you've listened to me or been in any of my classes, but I love how the branch enters up here and then exits down here in the bottom right. That's kind of neat. But while I'm not sure I would have initially thought when this bird landed that I would have liked this branch over here, in the end, it actually made for a neat framing element, especially considering the angle of the look or the gaze of the bluebird herself. Here's another picture of bluebird, and in many ways, I love the out of focus green background that you see here. But initially, I didn't really like the out of focus branch and kind of how it curved around here. And I suppose in some circumstances I'd probably clone that out, take that out. But at the same time, it becomes a framing element. And the more I've looked at some of these pictures, the more I've realized that it's a neat framing element for this bird sitting up on the sharp branch that's in focus. This is a robin up against a washed out sky, which isn't usually my normal preference when I'm trying to photograph some of these animals, but I loved how I was able to get the robin actually chirping and the beak open when he was doing that. But beyond that, this is not only a dominant line of this branch that he's sitting on, but beyond that, it's almost really a framing device that you see. And so it's just kind of a neat example of that framing element to kind of draw your attention to his head and to the beak that's open. Here's a duck that I photographed on the greenway nearby to my house, and especially with the duck looking off to the left side of the frame there, it's great to have that kind of that trunk of that tree to kind of frame him up and to kind of hold down the composition itself. Here was I could almost call this peekaboo with this cardinal, where you barely was able to get the cardinal's head coming out from behind just all the foliage that was in the way. But it made for kind of a neat composition once I was able to get you got the dominant branch here, and then you've got these seed pods, but then you can kind of tell that the head is sharp. And that's a great point, is that some of these shots, especially if you're going to kind of shoot through things to get the framing effect with this wildlife, is it's single point autofocus, and it can be a real challenge to get that single point straight through all the other things so that you don't get a picture of a branch that's sharp and a animal that's out of focus. Here was the gecko. Some of you saw even a more dramatic picture I got of this gecko the other day. But as a framing device goes, I think this line of the mortar in the brick becomes a great framing device. And I certainly love the shadow below him. It's just an exact shadow, and it's a nice deep dark shadow below his head and below his body as well. Squirrel. I don't know if I love this branch in front of the squirrel, but certainly the branch that he's sitting on is a framing device, as well as this tree behind him. It kind of gives you a center focus and kind of draws your eye towards the direction that the squirrel is looking, or that his body is facing towards. This is an interesting shot of this woodpecker, because ultimately the angle of the woodpecker's body almost mimics exactly the angle of the dominant framing device or the branch that the woodpecker is hanging on to. You certainly have the smaller branches behind him, but that dominant branch really mimics that angle that he is hanging from right now. This cardinal picture didn't do a lot for me at the beginning when I first saw it. Not a lot of color in it, etc. But one of the things I noticed, certainly I do like this branch that he's sitting on. It's a nice compositional tool that she's sitting on, I'm sorry. But beyond that, I did notice how that line behind the crown of her head is almost exactly in line with the angle of the body. And it was just neat to see how some of the lines, the diagonals, kind of line themselves up. Another picture of the squirrel, kind of I call him the pointer dog pose, because he's kind of hanging down, looks like a pointer dog, especially with that one little foot that's up in the air. But not only an interesting example of rule of thirds in the composition, but really the tree that he's on is a big framing device that kind of holds this image down visually. In this case, I wasn't able to get the robin exactly on a red bud, right on the purple buds themselves, or on a branch that had those purple buds just right on it. But you could see how this is really a framing device of the out of focus red buds above the robin's head and back behind him. So at least you have an idea of the sense of the environment, the time of season, the time of year, etc., because of the framing that was able to be applied. This case, this duck was actually right behind my house when we had a little bit more rain. And I got down really low on purpose to kind of get this angle, but to incorporate some of the out of focus grass in the foreground. Almost makes you look like you're looking through the wild into this duck's space. And so the grass at the bottom is kind of a framing device. And then this one I'm very proud of. It took me a while to capture this type of shot, but initially I'd want the deer in the wide open, great grassy field. This is all behind my house, back a little bit beyond what you see behind me. But it was kind of neat to have the deer peeking through this V-shaped tree, and to really use that tree as almost a perfect framing device for the actual deer himself, as you kind of look through that space and then see the deer in the background. I just want to share a few of these pictures with you to give you some ideas. If you say, well, what's an assignment, or what's something I can try today? Certainly be out shooting and find some wildlife between greenways, neighborhood, parks, and around your home. Anything that you can photograph, and you may even get more ideas from watching some of the Instagram posts I've been doing, but anything you can photograph I think is great exercise. And one of the things I always suggest with wildlife photography is get the shot and then get creative. Sometimes you just need to get a picture first, and then if the animal continues to be there and you know you've got a well exposed sharp picture, then you might be thinking a little bit more about the compositional elements. But I hope this gives you some ideas for how you might be able to apply framing elements around your subject matter that you and I don't often control, but how you might be able to apply those to really make for some more dynamic images and great compositions in their final form. Thank you again for joining me for today's Photo Minute. My name is Brian Osborne, and I hope you get a chance to go out and shoot later on today. Be sure to share some pictures on our Facebook page if you'd like to. Be great to see what everybody's up to. And be sure to check out our upcoming class schedule. We have some virtual classes that are coming up, as well as the Composition 1 this coming Thursday will be our first of a series of 3 or 4 classes that we've already posted on our website at thephotoclassroom.com. Thank you again. Have a great day.